Welcome to this episode of the Shared Security Podcast. And joining me today is very special guest, Jeswin Mathai, Chief Architect at SquareX. Welcome to the podcast, Jeswin.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So for our listeners, this is actually part 2 of my interview series with SquareX. So a couple weeks ago, we had Vivek, who is the founder of SquareX, and now we have Jeswin here. We're going to talk a little more in depth about SquareX and their solution. But before we get into that, Jeswin, for our audience that doesn't know you, perhaps you can give them a little bit of an overview of who you are and maybe a little bit about your background.
Sure. So hello, everyone. My name is Jeswin. I've been working with SquareX for over 1.5 years. And overall in the cybersecurity domain, I've been in there for 6 years. Previously, I was working at Pentester Academy. I've been working with Vivek for the past 6 years now. I started off as an intern. And this was a time we did not have that many good platforms to learn cybersecurity. And we went ahead, built out our attack defense lab platforms from scratch. And everything went well. We had a massive impact with the company. But eventually we wanted to do something bigger. That's where we decided to hand off the company to a US firm. And then we started with SquareX. So over my journey at Pentester Academy, got to learn quite a lot of things. Had a great opportunity to teach various students around the globe. So I have conducted training in Black Hat, and New Zealand OWASP Day, a couple of other conferences around the globe, RootCon in Philippines, and so on, as well as published a couple of great tools. So AWS Code, Azure Code, BA Toolkit, all of those open source tools I got an opportunity to work with. And when Vivek came up with the idea of SquareX, I was completely on board because this was our time to go ahead and have an impact on a massive scale in terms of both consumers as well as on the enterprise side.
And yeah, it's just great hearing about your background. I'm a big open source guy, and I really appreciate your contributions to the community with your open source tooling and the things that you've released. So I just think that's really important. And as for SquareX, yeah, I love the things that you guys are doing. And today we actually want to talk a little bit more in depth about SquareX. Can you talk maybe a little bit about how SquareX protects users as they interact with the web?
So one of the issues Vivek had seen was because we have all of these established company, right? So antiviruses and so on. They were there, but at the end of the day, the consumer was still getting hacked. So that means they're not doing that great of a job. And if you take a look at the numbers, right? Phishing scams over the years, the numbers have just keep on increasing, irrespective of the advancement in the technology. That's when we realized that the attackers are like, and everyone knows it, attackers are the smartest guys on the planet. They find a way to evade all of the possible security solutions that are in place. So antiviruses were very relevant at a time where attacks were happening on the host device. By host device, I mean some ext or some file will get dropped, and then your application might open it and then ends up compromising the device. So attackers started just being on the browser. So without dropping anything, they'll try to, scam the victim. They'll have a phishing page where the user enters the credential, and then eventually it leads to, it opens the gate to the enterprise. So with SquareX, the idea was that we want to protect the users first on the browser level, and then eventually on the host level. So sitting on the browser, so one big problem with all of the existing solution is that they lack the visibility onto the browser. They can't go ahead figure out what websites users are visiting. And all of this is because browser itself is quite isolated in terms of processes and sharing information with other software solutions. But as a browser extension, we can go ahead, monitor the user activity in a very privacy safe way. So we have a great solutions out there which go ahead, send the data of the user onto the cloud and do the analysis there. But they're not that privacy safe. And more importantly, anytime you process something on the cloud, it will go ahead, slow down the user experience and in a way impacts user productivity. While remaining on the browser, we see what the user is seeing, and we can go ahead very easily leverage the device's power. So a decade back, we would have device which would be like 4 gigs or even lower configuration one. But in today's time, we are talking about 8 gig devices, similarly 16 or even more powerful devices. And the browser itself has evolved quite a lot, allowing SquareX to monitor the user's action So the best example I can give you is, let's say you go to a website that looks like Facebook, but it is a phishing page. So right there on the browser, we can leverage the power of WebAssembly, take a screenshot of the page, do the analysis and identify that, oh, this looks like Facebook, but definitely it is hosted on a different domain. And we can prompt the user that, oh, you have to be cautious at this. Similarly, being at the browser, we are very rich in terms of metrics. So anytime someone copies something from, let's say, site A and they paste something on site B, we know that this was a copy paste action. It was not something that the user themselves has entered. Similarly, on the browser, we have the power of browser extensions, right? So a lot of attackers, what they are doing is they go ahead, purchase various extensions from Chrome store, and then they release an update to inject their malicious code into it. So all of this, again, we as a sitting as a browser extension can very easily flag. So in a way, with SquareX, we have the power to go ahead and monitor all of the users' workflow and then act on it by sitting right there on the browser in a privacy safe way. Let's say someone goes ahead, figures out that, let's say an administrator enforces a policy that is violated. At that time, we can report some things rather than going ahead sending all the data to the cloud. So leveraging the power of the end device, we can provide much better security at the same time without hampering users' productivity.
Yeah, that's really great. Maybe if you could speak to this real quick before we get into some demos, is there's a lot of talk about secure web gateways and obviously endpoint security solutions. We've been promoting that solution in the industry for a long time. What is the problem today with both of those solutions and how is SquareX different?
So we'll start with the endpoint security. So endpoint security does not have visibility on what's happening on the browser. Let's say a file download, and the moment it hits the disk, from that point onwards, the endpoint security agent will get activated and then it can analyze the file. And that point too, it will only know that the file maybe came from uh, this specific domain because they have a mark of the web, which has that information, but it does not have any context of how it came to be. So let's say an attack happened, right? So in a large campaign, attackers, what they'll do is, and this is an attacker group, so they'll try to go ahead, leverage multiple channels to, at the end of the day, compromise an employee. So now once an employee is compromised, your endpoint security agent, all it will know is that something was downloaded from chrome.exe. It wouldn't be able to tell you that the user came from this website, went to this website, and then eventually downloaded this file. So that's one I'd say lack of visibility of the endpoint security. Now, at the same time, if we take a look at secure web gateway solutions, right? So secure web gateway primarily are around URL filtering. So, and a lot of times, all of these URL are broadly categorized. So with this, I mean, for example, someone hosts something on, let's say, github.com. Now, all of those github.com URLs would be whitelisted by secure web gateway and would be categorized under, let's say, IT technology. But on one page of GitHub, someone would have hosted some malicious content. And now this malicious content goes through secure web gateway. Now, let's say an attack has happened. SWG at that point will only know that something came from this domain. It wouldn't have insight of how multiple actions connect together. And this is a big problem for, again, security teams, because they won't be able to figure out which website to block, which user is compromised, and what is the overall blast radius. So this is where SquareX shines. SquareX, in a way, fills the void among both. So by sitting on the browser, we can go ahead and enrich the metric for the endpoint as well as provide insights to SWG if needed. So this is where, again, we can very easily chalk out the user's journey. So let's say user received an email from a specific individual, and then from there, he went ahead and clicked on a link, which in turn downloaded a file. All of this we can very easily plot out. This provides the admin visibility on who is the attacker, who are the impacted individuals, and what is the overall blast radius, and allowing them to go ahead and contain the attack and do what's best for the organization.
Yeah, that's one of the best things that I love about SquareX is, even when we try to educate users on don't click these links, look for these suspicious URLs, it only takes one time for an employee or a user to click on a malicious link. And we all know that's all it takes for an attacker is they're looking for that one person. And that's what I like about SquareX is that someone does happen to click on it. it's already sandboxed, it's being protected, and it's being analyzed. I think that's really cool. Can you show us maybe a demonstration of how SquareX works in action?
So now, basically, we want to provide as much flexibility, as much control as possible to the admin. And what we have done so far is we have exposed every possible property. So for example, we can control or build out policy on various actions. So the action could be your file download, file upload, site visit, site content, URL, user input, clipboard copy paste, as well as on browser extension. So now let's say we want to go ahead, isolate all of the files uh, on all of Office document files that contain macro in it. So I'll quickly go ahead, select file download from here. And now if we scroll down here, we have over hundreds of properties exposed. So from, let's say, URL domain age to whether the IP address is in, or like the domain is top domain, is there a type of squatting, and so on. So all of this is available to the admin. So we are very, very granular in terms of properties. So everything available on the browser is in a way available to the administrator. Now, we know that the learning curve might be a bit high because not everyone will get similarity with the properties on day one. This is where we are leveraging the power of AI. We can very easily ask the AI, isolate all Office documents which contain backup. And if we click on generate, it will take a couple of seconds time. It will take all of the properties and pick the relevant ones for us. And if you scroll down, here we can notice we have exposed a property which says has VBA macro as well as has XLM macro. So there are two different type of macros on Office documents. So both of them, if they exist, then these values will be set to true. Now, in order to enhance as well as help the administrator in building better policies, we have prompt feedback. So this tells the administrator that how you can enhance it a bit more better. So they can simply copy this and paste and then use this. And in a way, this will help them in learning or like better using the LLM to dump out the policies. Now here we can notice the effect is set to isolate. So this policy says that any file that has VBA micro or XLM macro, isolate it. Now we can go ahead, quickly select the group and click on date. So, sorry, just a second, go back. So I already had the policy created. I'll quickly go to my other browser profile. So here on this account, I have a couple of Office documents. Two of them have macro. So when we click on it, it will go ahead, download the, just a second, let me redo this part. So this policy I had it for blog, so that's why I'll blog. To avoid any confusion, let me start from scratch. Take a few seconds. I'll quickly select a customer group and click on save. So you go back here. Usually it takes close to a minute time for the, worst it can take up to a minute time for the policy to be updated. And now we can notice that right there in the browser, we analyze the document and we figured out that this was potentially suspicious or malicious. So done based on the function call that are present inside macro. Now we have an option to open it in say file viewer. So we can quickly go ahead, click on this and it gets isolated. So we are not hampering the user's productivity. Rather, we provide a net way to view the file. This way, their device at all time remains safe. We go back here. Similarly, we also have a Office with Office 365 based isolation. So anytime you want to get, let's say, get the feel of Office 365, you can open the file and this will provide a full Office interface. We go back. So on the detections page, we'll see these actions. So now we can see a proper graph being created. So I got an email from Tim Doss, who sent a mail to Arthur, who went ahead and opened or downloaded the XLSM file, which in turn was isolated due to presence of macro. Now let me go ahead, quickly change the policy to block. Now we can go to other profiles. So this was just one user. Let me go to the other users. So here I have user Emma. So the previous one was Arthur. I'll try to download the same file and it gets blocked. Now similarly, if we go to Evelyn, and this file also gets blocked. Now if you go back to detections, we'll see the detection for multiple. Now, at times, it's about the whole story, right? So multiple users in the organization might be attacked. This is where we have the power of related attacks. So it correlates what's happening across the organization and provides a holistic view of what's happening. So here, from one single users, we got uh, basically 3 users were impacted, and eventually they ended up downloading the same file. Few of them were blocked, and one of them was isolated. This is again because we changed the policy block. Now, at times, to make it easier for the administrator to understand what's actually happening, we have supercharged this with the help of AI. So it beautifully generates a summary of the event of what exactly had happened. Now, if we go back to detections, and here we should see the attack vision as well. So anytime a policy gets evaluated, and let's say the action is block or isolate, we go ahead capture of what exactly had happened few seconds before the event. And this way, admin can actually see what the user did.
Wow.
Them to make a decision on whether this user actually fell prey to an attack or whether it was intentional and so on. So the whole idea about SquareX is providing as much visibility as possible to the administrator, allowing them access to all of the possible properties and to go ahead do what's best for the organization.
Wow, that's really cool. Specifically, I love showing the attack graph of how the attack happened, but also if there were multiple users involved, you can then see visually how those users are connected to the attack. And I really liked seeing the actual capture, the screen capture, the actual video showing the user clicking on the malicious attachment. I think that's really important, especially from an investigation standpoint. If you're trying to understand if your organization is being attacked or targeted, it's really important to see what the user was doing, because oftentimes in an investigation, you have to interview them, you have to ask them, and then it's very hard sometimes to coordinate that with the users.
Yes, I completely agree with you. So in this case, again, we are helping out the admin as much as possible, providing as much visibility as possible. And at times, what might end up happening is the admin might not be even aware that these are the user patterns. So what we have done is we have also created a informational action effect. So let's say we go here, we can mark it as informational. So in a way, this allows admin to see what's happening. And let's say the user is constantly visiting one specific site and the admin is not aware that this site could be dangerous for the organization. So they can make decisions on top of that as well.
Can you speak a little bit about deployment options? I think some of our listeners may be part of very large organizations or even some very small organizations. What is the process like to deploy the browser extension into the organization?
We go ahead support the MDM route, as well as we can very easily use Chrome managed solution and Edge managed solution. So all of the enterprises, we very seamlessly plug into their existing deployment strategies. And actually, Chrome extension itself has evolved quite a lot. So the support is pretty good.
Oh, good. Excellent. Because that's oftentimes a question we'll get in these conversations is how easy is it to deploy? And it sounds like it's extremely easy. That's good. Can you talk a little bit about a ransomware scenario?
I think there are multiple parts to it. First is, again, we have the whole power of WebAssembly through which we can analyze the file right there in the browser before it even drops. So for example, our whole Office document scanning happens right there in the browser without anyone or anything touching the disk. So that is first part. And second, being on the browser, we can very easily go ahead, figure out the basically phishing websites, their behavior, how they are interacting with the user's device. And based on that, we get flagged. So, and because we have the context of what exactly happened, right? So if we take a look at the recent attacks that have been happening on the user, one of the attack was that they are leveraging existing services such as SharePoint as well as GitHub to go ahead, trigger a user action. By this, I mean, let's say you are an employee of the company, an attacker can go ahead, share a SharePoint document with you or a link with you. Now you'll get a notification saying that this person shared a SharePoint document with you. And when you click on it, you go to an official SharePoint link. So this is an attack that recently happened. So you'll get a notification like this. When you click on it, it will take you to official SharePoint server where you have one more icon or an image to click on. When you click on it, it now takes you to a phishing website. And this is where, again, you might end up going ahead entering your credential because you think that this is official Microsoft domain. And this way, attacker gets hold of your credential. And the credentials, once they have access, they can further go ahead, compromise the documents. And all of these attacks are mature enough to, bypass 2FA. So they'll go ahead, capture the 2FA, and behind the scenes enter it on the actual website to facilitate a full end-to-end connection. Now, another attack that we have seen recently was based on QR code. So attackers know that employees' device might have probably the best security solution out there. So they try to take out the employee's workflow from the device to the phone. So the users might end up receiving a email which has a QR code. Now, the moment you scan a QR code on your mobile phone, technically your workflow has transitioned to mobile phone. And that's where, again, attackers can go ahead, conduct severe phishing attacks. And if you think about it, the display on the phone, right, it will only show select part of the domain. So if they have sufficiently long domain with most likely, a dot or something missing, a lot of folks might not even know that this is not an official Microsoft domain. And the moment they sign in, now, again, the employee compromised. And from there, again, attackers can get further into the organization to go ahead and target other employees. So with SquareX, sitting on the browser, we can go ahead combat against all of these techniques, even before they end up, stealing the credential or dropping a file. So that's the power we have. So when it compares to even secure web gateways today, right? So the SharePoint example. So now the user got a link of SharePoint over their email, they clicked on it. And then from there, they eventually hopped onto multiple sites to eventually get phished. So all of this, the context that we have, that a user came from this specific, let's say the notification came from this specific user, went to SharePoint. From there, it hopped to this site. From there, it went to this site. All of this context chaining we can do very easily on the browser, which none of the providers out there can do. So in a way, we are acting way before attack can happen, or we have the power to act before attack happens.
Yeah, that's so great. We've talked about secure web gateways, and we do have the DEFCON hacking conference coming up in Las Vegas in a couple weeks. And speaking with Vivek a couple weeks ago, he said that you both are going to be speaking at DEFCON. Can you give our listeners maybe a little bit of a preview of what you'll be talking about?
Sure. I think the talk is basically about breaking secure web gateways for fun and profit. So we are going to demonstrate various techniques with which attacker can go ahead, circumvent the protection that SWG provides. And a couple of issues that are there, we can very easily go ahead, construct some of the attacks on the browser without SWG even knowing, because SWG primarily takes a look at static network traffic, right? So they can't go ahead, perform or do in-depth analysis of the network traffic and can't figure out what's going to happen on the end device. So basically the attack would demonstrate all of the client-side attacks that are happening. And some of these attacks might even be happening today, but no one can detect right now. The whole talk is around this.
That's exciting. That's really exciting. So for those of you out at DEFCON, definitely look that up. All right. Well, Jeswin, this has been really great having you on the podcast and great to see a demo of SquareX. How can our listeners find out more about you and SquareX?
So we can visit to or go navigate to squarex.com. There we have all of the use cases of SquareX, as well as our consumer version of the product is available for everyone to try out. So that's where they can go ahead and explore the product.
So yeah, you can just download the extension. You can try this out for yourself. I definitely recommend that if you haven't used SquareX before, if you'd like to try it. And of course, we'll have all of those links for everyone in our show notes. Well, Jeswin, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Good luck with your talk at DEFCON. Hopefully I get to see you that week. I'll be there all week in Las Vegas, sweating like the rest of us in the heat in the desert.
Excited to be there. Yeah. So much
Yeah.
comfort.
And for everyone else, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching or listening to this episode. Be sure to subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts, follow us on X @SharedSec, and help support the podcast by joining our Patreon to get ad-free episodes, bonus content, and many more exclusive supporter-only benefits. Visit sharedsecurity.net/supporter for more details.